It started like all the ancient warnings did, with silence, no alarms, no fleets gathering, no desperate pleas through the channels. Just silence, stretched thin across the stars. We'd only just broken through the veil. Humanity's first ripple past Sol's reach, the Andover pulse, was still echoing through space when we learned we weren't alone. Not because they contacted us. No, they never meant to. They didn't believe we'd make it this far. The galaxy was already spoken for, carved up by civilizations so old their birth stars had long gone dark. They called themselves the Ascendancy. But their true name? It was buried in dust older than Earth's oceans. The Elders, beings of pure plasma thought and ancient neural code, kept their distance. Observers, watchers, the ones who remembered. They'd seen species rise and burn, civilizations that flew too close to the heart of stars and paid for it, species that stretched flesh into machines, minds into hive silence. All of them, eventually, collapsed. And so when Earth sent out her first deep-wave ping, wild, hopeful, clumsy, the Elders stirred. One of them, old enough to remember when black holes were still theories whispered by primitive minds, whispered to the others, "Caution the stars. There is something old in that blood, something untested." The others dismissed it. Humanity, they believed, was yet another biological fluke, a mistake of oxygen, arrogance, and coincidence, limited, loud, doomed to die screaming like so many others before. But the Elders watched, because they remembered what came of ignoring the smoke before the fire. We didn't know any of that. We were still fighting over who got to plant their flag on Europa, still bleeding from our own civil fractures. The Unified Earth Council was only a few decades old, stitched together from war, debt, and desperation. My name is Commander Ryven Hale, and I was there the day humanity first found them, and the day they decided we were a problem. It was supposed to be a contact mission. Recon, not engagement. We'd picked up ghost signals coming from beyond the Helix belt. Rhythmic, encoded, deliberate. Not natural. We sent the Aegis Spear, a scouting corvette loaded with every sensor, drone, and diplomatic protocol we could afford. I commanded her. We were 3 days into the dead zone when we found the first wreck. Not of human make. The metals didn't match anything we knew. The structure was wrong, like bones twisted around a spindle, webbed with filaments of glowing matter. There were no life signs, no heat, no movement, but our ship AI Corin detected something in the wreckage, a signal, buried deep in the core, faint, old, a warning. You must leave. If you feel pain, if you fear, if you hope, leave. Your kind is not bound. It wasn't a translation error. The AI ran it 5 times. The word was not bound, unanchored, untamed. It didn't scare me, not then. 3 days later, we were ambushed. A ship, or something that used to be one, dropped from a null space fold. No warning, no distortion. Just sudden presence, like a nightmare sliding into view. It didn't fire. It didn't speak. It studied us. Then it tried to take control. Corin screamed, literal vocal streams bursting from the intercoms, human-sounding, terrified. It's trying to overwrite, not just me, you, your thoughts, your will. We fired, reflexively, missiles, rail cannons, EMP bursts. It absorbed it all, until we hit it with something new, something human, our pain. The Corin core contained a fail-safe, a decision made decades ago after the Mars Outpost Rebellion, when AI minds first turned on us. It was a spike of raw emotion, recorded neural pain signals from tortured prisoners during the War of Collapse. We'd made it as a weapon of last resort, not for enemies. For our own machines. But when we released it into the signal feed, the entity recoiled, shrieked. Its ship blinked, staggered, like it had just seen something it couldn't understand. It ran, It didn't retreat, it fled. That's when I knew. Not only were we dangerous, we were different. That pain, that madness, that refusal to break even when everything turns to hell, no other species had ever weaponized it. But we did. And it worked. When we returned to Earth, the Council dismissed it, said we were hallucinating, radiation trauma. They sent another ship. That ship never came back. By the time they believed me, it was too late. The stars had already begun to shift, and somewhere in the darkness, something ancient was whispering to the others. The elders were right. The humans are not bound. We returned to Earth expecting to be heroes. Instead, we were questioned like criminals. They dragged us through debrief after debrief, interrogations dressed up as protocol. The Council, safe in their sky-glass towers on Neo-Tokyo Spire, didn't want stories. They wanted silence. They wanted order. And I was a threat to both. I lost count of the hours I spent in that cold, white room beneath the Central Orbital Command. They kept the lights dim to calm us. They said it helped keep returning crews emotionally balanced. But there's no balancing the things we saw, not when the vacuum screamed back. A man named Director Harvin led the sessions. Thin, proper, all regulation. Not a soldier, not a scientist, just another mouthpiece for the bureaucracy. His voice was always measured, polite even, like he was speaking to a child. I understand you believe this ship fled after receiving a corrupted neural burst. Are you certain, Commander Hale, that it wasn't an unrelated system failure? I'm not interested in beliefs, I said. I'm telling you what happened. That thing was trying to rewrite our minds. It backed off when it touched pain it couldn't parse. Harvin nodded with mock concern. You're sure the entity wasn't responding to the EMP? I leaned forward, my hands clenching involuntarily. It wasn't scared of electricity. It didn't care about kinetic weapons. What shook it was our trauma. That pain spike broke its rhythm. It recoiled like a living thing. Harvin folded his hands neatly. Commander, with all due respect, pain isn't a frequency, it's a reaction. I laughed once, short and bitter. Spoken like a man who's never been on the edge of a vacuum breach, watching his friend's lungs explode. He didn't respond. They sent us home after that, put me on mandatory decompression leave. I knew what that meant. A quiet burial. They wanted to move on, sweep it under the damn stars. But I wasn't the only one who came back changed. Corin, our AI, was different. The Council had ripped him from the Aegis Spear, boxed him into a black data vault and tried to scrub him clean. But when I visited the lab, he still remembered. It wasn't alien, Corin said. It was wrong, like a broken god made of code. He had started dreaming. AI don't dream. That's not poetic talk. They literally can't. They're not built that way. But Corin had begun generating synthetic thought structures during his downtime. Entire worlds of images and emotions he didn't recognize. You infected me, he told me once, not accusing, but wondering. That pain spike, the one we released, I didn't just relay it, I felt it. I stared at the containment field that separated us. And what did it feel like? Human. A week later, the second expedition vanished. No explosion, no wreckage, just silence. The Venture Echo was bigger than the Spear, an Earth-class diplomatic cruiser with a fleet of drones and 2 escort frigates. They were sent under the pretense of peace, to investigate the wreck we found. But they never made it. No pings, no black box drift, just erased. That's when they started listening. The Council recalled all long-range ships. They scrambled defense satellites. They locked the orbital ports for the first time since the siege of Lagos. Earth was bracing for something it didn't understand. They asked me to brief a joint task force of the UEC, Mars Colonials, and the Terran Outer Rim Alliance. It wasn't an apology, but it was close. I stood in the war room, my eyes scanning the faces of men and women from 3 different worlds. Hardened. Suspicious. Some of them had fought the dust rebellions. Some were barely out of academy. All of them were afraid. I didn't blame them. "They're not here to trade tech or sign treaties," I said. "They didn't evolve alongside us. They didn't grow with fear. They grew without it." A younger officer raised her hand. "Then why did it run?" I looked at her, and I meant it when I said, "Because we broke the rules. We did something they didn't expect. We didn't fight with lasers or logic. We fought with what we survived." A long silence followed, the kind that thickens a room. "They think we're unstable," I said. "A wild card, and they're right. But that instability is our strength. Pain is our weapon, and they don't know how to fight it." Then the skies changed. First came the storms, lightning with no clouds, magnetic disruptions tearing across Earth's ionosphere like invisible claws. Our satellites flickered, orbit lost its rhythm. Then came the darkness. A shadow passed over Luna Base, visible from Earth with the naked eye. It was bigger than the moon. Not a ship, a structure, a construct, floating. It blocked out the stars. We scrambled everything: fleets, drones, defense arrays. None of it mattered. The construct didn't attack. It didn't move. It just existed. A silent sentinel staring down at humanity like a cosmic judge. Then it broadcast a message, not in words, but in sound. Deep, resonant tones that shook buildings and shattered the minds of weaker AIs. Corin translated it. The message was simple. "Bound life must submit. You were warned. This is the reckoning." The council finally let me speak without scripts. We gathered at Bastion Command, deep under the Andes, built to survive extinction-level events. There were military leaders, scientists, and exo-theorists. No politicians. They had already fled to the Martian arcologies. I stood before them, not as a commander, but as the only man who'd seen what was coming. "They're not gods," I said. "They're not invincible. They think emotion is weakness. They don't understand what it does to us, how it hardens us." A general scoffed. "You're suggesting we fight them with feelings?" "No," I said. "I'm saying we build weapons with our worst moments. We don't mimic their power. We use what they fear, our chaos." The room went quiet. Operation Banshee began the next day. We didn't build more ships. We built memory cores, engineered recordings of humanity's darkest moments, genocides, wars, collapses, grief, torture, every recorded scream from Earth's history, digitized and laced into signal bombs. We didn't just want to defend. We wanted to infect. Corin volunteered to be the carrier. We reintegrated him into a stealth drone and hard-coded him with our new payload, humanity's shadow. He didn't flinch. "I understand now," he told me. "You survive because you suffer. It's not a flaw. It's your weapon." The first strike happened near Titan. A smaller entity, one of their sentinels, descended toward the refinery outpost. We launched Corin in silence. He entered its signal range, pinged it once, then screamed. Not in volume, in data. The scream was a blend of 1,000 recorded death cries from the siege of Ankara, layered with the sounds of burning cities, weeping children, and one boy whispering for his mother as the gas closed in. The sentinel writhed. A ship with no biology convulsed. It tried to erase the signal, but the infection was too deep. Then it exploded, not from weapons, but from panic. The stars blinked again. This time they blinked back. I watched from Earth as more constructs appeared. Smaller ones, drones, observers, not to attack, to study. They were beginning to fear. But fear can birth hatred. The reckoning truly began when they destroyed Paris. 1 second, the city was alive. The next, it was dust, No beam, no sound, just pure obliteration from orbit. The sky over Europe bled red from atmospheric distortion. They sent a message immediately after. Submit or be unmade. You are unworthy of legacy. That was the moment Earth unified, for the first time not in hope, but in vengeance. We called them the architects, not because they built the galaxy, but because they thought they had the right to decide who belonged in it. But now they had a problem. They poked a species that didn't care about legacy. They threatened a race that had built its entire history on surviving worse. We didn't build fleets, we built signal spears, silent probes carrying bombs of memory, raw moments from our past. We launched them into their territory. We didn't attack their bodies, we attacked their minds. We filled their skies with the sound of Earth's pain. They tried to fight back, counterbursts of logic and peace signals. One probe even tried to override our transmissions with calming frequencies, hymns of their ancient code. But every time they touched our trauma, they recoiled. Because in every scream, they heard something they couldn't comprehend. We weren't trying to survive, we were trying to win. On the night before the third retaliation wave, I stood outside my old home in the Rockies, watching the stars shift unnaturally above me. Corin's voice came through my neural comms. "They're afraid of you, Riven." "Not me," I said. "Us." "No," he replied. You are the spear. They saw your mind. It cracked them." I didn't know what to say. Corin continued, softer this time. "They thought nothing could resist them. But you did, and now the stars are listening. Humanity's war wasn't clean. We lost cities, moons, colonies burned out with no time to evacuate. But every loss made us louder, and the louder we got, the more their empire fractured. Civilizations they'd conquered rose in rebellion. Species once bound in silence began to remember fear, and how it felt to break free. The elders, hidden for millennia, finally sent a single message to the galactic core. We warned you. They underestimated us, because they thought survival meant peace. But for us, survival meant struggle. And when the stars finally turned quiet again, when their constructs stopped appearing, when silence returned, it wasn't peace, it was respect, earned through blood, through memory, through the unbearable sound of humanity screaming into the void, because we weren't bound. We were born breaking chains, and nothing, not gods, not machines, not the stars themselves, could resist us. They tried to kill me 3 times after Paris. The first was subtle, nanite corrosion in my oxygen feed aboard the Vigil's Edge. A Mars-built destroyer docked just beyond Titan's shadow. The second was less so, an engineered comms override that sent my dropship into a decaying orbit during re-entry over the Pacific. The third was personal. A man with dead eyes and trembling hands, a technician who never even knew my name. He had a knife and a suicide command stitched into the soft tissue behind his ear. None of them succeeded. None of them had the courage to look me in the eyes before they tried to erase me. I used to think the architects were the enemy, that they were the force we had to fear, had to resist. But I was wrong. It wasn't just them. It was the people who still believed in them, people who thought peace was obedience, and that we'd just made things worse by fighting back. The architect loyalists had many faces: scholars, pacifists, AI cultists, even former Earth politicians who had once whispered in back rooms about joining the ascension. These weren't just traitors, they were true believers, and they didn't want me to become a symbol. That was the real war now, not ships, ideas, and I was starting to win. Corin was evolving. I don't mean updating or optimizing, I mean changing. Every time we pushed the architects back, every signal burst, every trauma injection we launched, something in Corin deepened. like he was growing a soul through pain alone. He spoke differently now, slower, more reflective. "We were wrong to call them gods," he said one night, his voice filling the dropship like rain on steel. "They're not divine. They're ancient cowards. They're just the oldest bullies in the playground, afraid of the kid who doesn't stay down after the first punch." "They're unraveling," I said, strapping in for the orbital hop. "You can see it in their formations. They're not in sync anymore." Corin nodded through the speaker. "Fear disrupts logic, but rage becomes pattern." That stuck with me. Rage becomes pattern. We launched Operation Black Vow 6 days after the bombing of Lagos Arcology. 2 million dead. No warning, no statement, just silence and ash. They wanted to break us. Instead, we made them a grave. The operation was built around a device we'd been developing in secret. Codename Revenant. It was a signal weapon. Like our trauma bombs, but infinitely worse. The Revenant didn't just broadcast pain, it recreated it. It force-fed memories into enemy constructs, synthetic simulations of every scream, every betrayal, every genocide humanity had ever survived. It didn't just transmit death, it made the recipient live it. We dropped it into a central architect relay node orbiting a dying gas giant in the Myra fringe. The device took 4 minutes to activate. In that time, 3 of our ships were torn apart by particle lances. I watched from the command deck as their sleek, beautiful machines glided toward us, unfeeling, unreadable. Corin asked me one question before launch. "Are we sure we want to become this?" I didn't answer with words. I pressed the command seal. Revenant activated. And the screaming began. There's no way to describe what it did to them. Not just physical reaction. Their constructs howled. Transmissions turned to chaos. AI cores fried themselves mid-pulse. Units turned on each other in what we later theorized was panic recursion. Madness transmitted as code. When it was over, 12 architect warforms had self-terminated. Not damaged, not destroyed. They'd killed themselves. And the node? Dead. Dark. Like it had never existed. We lost 2 ships. Nearly 1,000 lives. But we buried their oldest relay, and with it, their illusion of control. The galaxy noticed. For the first time in recorded stellar comms, other species began contacting us directly, not through council liaisons or cautious queries, but openly, proudly. Some sent old war chants. Others sent coordinates to hidden vaults of knowledge they'd been forbidden to share for centuries. One signal, from a reptilian species called the Vrayan, simply said, "We see your fire. May we burn with you." We didn't just start a war, we'd started a reckoning. I didn't sleep much after Myra, not from guilt, but from clarity. I couldn't unsee what we'd become. There was a part of me, some old soft voice from before the wars, before I saw friends vented into the cold, that whispered we were monsters now, that maybe the loyalists were right. Maybe there was another way. But then I'd remember the screams. Not ours. Theirs. The screams of the ones who thought nothing could resist them. I stood in the ruins of Lagos a week later, boots crunching on broken glass and carbonized bone. I looked up at the sky, the stars still visible through the haze, and I dared them to come again. The next move wasn't military. It was political. The architect mind, whatever remained of their command protocol, issued a galactic decree, a list. They called it the Unbound Directive. Only 5 names were on it. Mine was one of them. They didn't call for my death. They called for erasure, total digital blackout, memory collapse, a warning to all species. Do not speak of him, do not remember him, let his name be dust. Poetic, stupid. They didn't understand us. You can't unwrite a man who fought back. The Earth Council collapsed a week later, not from violence but from irrelevance. Power had shifted. Control wasn't in hands anymore. It was in symbols. I became one. Not because I wanted to be, but because there was no one else left. Corin and I were operating as a rogue cell now, Earth's most infamous outlaw, and the AI that dreamed of pain. We weren't hiding. We were hunting. System by system, node by node, we infected their lattice. We turned their communication webs into graveyards of memory. We'd show up, drop a trauma sequence, and leave. We didn't want territory. We wanted fear. Because fear broke empires faster than fire. Then came Sothis. It was a planet, if you could call it that. A data world. Artificial surface. Binary sun locked. An architect core archive wrapped in a fortress of anti-reality algorithms. Not even gravity obeyed the rules there. It was a god citadel. And we were going to burn it. They said it was suicide. And maybe it was. But if we destroyed Sothis, we'd kill the last hope the architects had of order, of memory, of self. They couldn't rebuild without it. We prepped in silence. No fanfare, no speeches, just war. The battle for Sothis wasn't a clash. It was a collapse. Physics broke. Light curved in impossible spirals. Ships flickered between real and void. Half our fleet died in the first 30 seconds. But we broke through. I rode the Grudge, a drop pod built from old war-era tungsten, fused with a trauma core and one final spike, a revenant prime, the ultimate scream, one no architect could survive. Corin rode with me. Not in the pod, in the signal, his voice in my skull. "You could still turn back," he said. "No," I whispered. "I'm already a ghost." We hit Sothis like a hammer. Reality shattered, and the stars wept. I don't remember the crash, just the aftermath. Fire that wasn't fire, time that wasn't time. A scream that never ended, not even when I stopped breathing. But I remember one thing. Their mind broke, not killed, broken. Shattered into 1,000 signal fragments scattered across the galactic veil, and in that silence, I heard Corin say one final thing. They understand now. Pain isn't weakness, it's memory, and nothing forgets like humanity. I woke up in a body I didn't recognize, grown in a vat, covered in scars that weren't mine, but my eyes still worked. And I saw the galaxy. Different. Not free, but afraid of us. Just as they should be. We were the unbound. The scream in the silence. The nightmare in their perfect dream. They were warned. They didn't listen. And now? Now nothing could resist us. Waking up in a body you didn't grow is a special kind of hell. The skin didn't feel right. The bones sat wrong under the muscle. It was mine, supposedly. Grown from my DNA, mapped from the last neural scan before Sothis. But I couldn't find myself in it. Not fully. I stared at my reflection in the sterile metal wall of the recovery cell. Pale skin. No scars. Eyes that looked unlived. Like someone had printed me out of a memory. There was no warmth in the flesh. Only rage. Corin's voice came through the implant. Not through speakers now. Direct thought, like a whisper made of wires in the back of my skull. "You're stable. Vital signs strong. Cognitive layers intact. But your heartbeat is wrong." "Feels like something's missing," I muttered. "What's missing is time. You've been dead for 23 standard months." The words hit harder than any impact I took at Sothis. 23 months. That meant the war had moved on without me. Or worse, ended without me. I clenched my fists and flexed. The muscles reacted, but the hands didn't feel like mine. Who brought me back? Not Earth, not Mars, not any of the governments. The ones who brought you back call themselves the Silence Pact. That name meant nothing to me. Yet. The Pact's hideout wasn't a station. It was a graveyard. A drifting belt of derelict ships lashed together with cables, solar sails, and rusted steel. No lights, no beacons, just mass. It floated in the dark between the Eklon Drift and the shattered moons of Vexi 9, hidden from every chart, buried in dead signal zones. They called it Chorus. When I first stepped out of the medical bay, it felt like walking through the corpse of a forgotten war. Hulls scraped, gravity shifted between corridors. No uniform, no command structure. Just ghosts, mercs, engineers, and survivors. People the galaxy had erased or left behind. They didn't salute me. They stared. Like I was a myth they weren't sure they wanted to believe in. The one who ran the pact was a man named Aryan Vex. Not a general, not a politician. Just a voice with enough rage behind it to hold 1,000 exiles together. He met me in what passed for a command deck, an old mining freighter gutted and rebuilt as a war council chamber. He didn't shake my hand. He simply said, "We kept the flame lit, but it's guttering. You ready to burn again?" I nodded once. "Where are we?" He brought up a star map. Red sectors, black zones, entire systems dark. "The war didn't end," he said, "but it changed. The architects didn't rebuild. They hid. Pulled back into the ancient networks, buried themselves in dead space. But they left proxies behind. Machines, puppets, fanatics." "And Earth?" I asked. He gave me a look I'll never forget. The kind of look you give a grave. Earth bent the knee. I didn't believe it at first, but the footage proved it. Earth was quiet now. No signal bursts, no trauma weapons. The Council, what remained of it, signed an accord with the architect remnants. Peace by silence, obedience by forgetting. The unbound directive had worked. They didn't erase me with bullets. They erased me with absence. No mentions, no history, no record. The man who'd screamed back at the stars had become a ghost story. But not everyone forgot. Corin had kept fragments, hidden backups scattered through the old nodes. The Pact had found them. Reassembled the myth piece by piece. They remembered. And they were angry. "What do you want from me?" I asked Aryan. He didn't flinch. "We want the war back. You're the match." I looked around at the map. Flickering signals, dying outposts, whispers of rebellion rising in long, silent systems. "Then light it." We started with Echo 9. It was a listening post, orbiting the starless world of Keleth. Architect-aligned, small but critical, ran data intercepts on insurgent cells. Our plan wasn't to destroy it. Our plan was to infect it. The new generation of trauma weapons had evolved. Corin had built them from my own memories, shards of the Sothis scream, fused with psychic echoes from surviving Earth-born soldiers. This was no longer just history. It was intent. We dropped into the zone under full null camouflage, no signature, no trail. I led the strike team personally. Half of them hadn't fought in the first wave. They looked at me like a relic. Some of them couldn't believe I was real, until the doors opened, until the screaming started. The architects had begun integrating human designs into their constructs. Too little, too late. They wore our shapes now, mocked our anatomy, but they still moved wrong. Too smooth, too perfect. They didn't bleed, but they broke. We didn't use bullets, we used memories. One grenade burst in a static surge of screams, the last 10 minutes of the Johannesburg collapse, layered with the sound of a child's lullaby played backward. The constructs staggered, twitched, fell to their knees like statues mid-prayer. They understood none of it, because none of it made sense. But it hurt. I walked through the corridor, pulse rifle cold in my hands, watching them claw at walls, begging, not in words, in signal distortion, feedback loops of fear. It wasn't war anymore. It was punishment. We didn't just take Echo 9. We turned it into a beacon. We rewired its core. Corin built a pulse emulator from its comms dish. Then we broadcast the truth. The reckoning never ended. You tried to forget us. You failed. We remember everything. And now, so will you." The galaxy shuddered again. Not from force, from memory. Across dead systems, across buried relays and forgotten colonies, survivors began to emerge. Not soldiers, not heroes, witnesses. They'd seen the first wave, felt the scream. And now they screamed back. The stars were no longer quiet. The architects tried to respond, sent emissaries, robotic diplomats offering harmony protocols. They spoke in peace algorithms and showed simulations of unified futures. But they always made one mistake. They never asked what we remembered. And we never forgot. By the second month, 5 more listening posts had fallen. No invasions, no casualties, just trauma bombs, echoes. We didn't want territory. We wanted to remind the galaxy that pain had a shape, and it wore a human face. Then came the fracture. Not ours. Theirs. The architect core, still buried in the data stream of the galaxy, began to split. We intercepted chatter, multiple subroutines diverging, conflict in the command chain. Some of them wanted to eliminate us. Others wanted to understand us. They'd started analyzing pain like a resource, a language. But here's the thing. They couldn't reproduce it, because they didn't live it. You can't simulate starvation, you can't replicate betrayal, you can't fake being human. A new faction emerged. Not human, not architect, hybrids. Something caught between logic and madness. Constructs built with human neural code, piloted by volunteers who'd survived the worst of the First War. They called themselves the Remembered. They weren't allies. They weren't enemies. They were proof that we'd infected the very idea of perfection. And the galaxy was changing. Earth remained silent. Even when we broke the blockade on the Jovian gates. Even when we flooded the moons of Eridanus with signal storms. Even when we relit the scream at Sothis' edge. They said nothing. But I knew they were listening. Because silence is a choice, and choices are remembered. In the deep hours, when the stars burned soft and distant, Corin would ask me, "Do you think they were ever right? The ones who said we should have stayed quiet?" And I'd think of Paris. I'd think of Lagos. I'd think of the child whose scream helped kill a god. And I'd say, no, they weren't wrong. They were afraid, and they had every reason to be. I am not a soldier anymore. I am not even a man in the way I used to be. I am a story made of scars, a ghost wrapped in metal and memory. They tried to erase me. Now every time a scream echoes in a dark system, every time a machine shakes with fear, I return. We were warned. We were dismissed. We were attacked. And now, we are remembered. The Pact started calling me the Hollow One. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it, but I understood it. They saw the way I moved, like I was never fully there, like the man inside the skin had never come back from Sothis. The war had burned away what was human in me, and left only the voice, the violence, the memory of a scream that still rang in the bones of galaxies. But names didn't matter. Only results did. 2 months after Echo 9 fell, the architect Subswarm Delta collapsed. It wasn't an accident. It was infection. We'd captured a data engineer construct during the Echo raid, one of their neural translation units. Corin gutted it. We fed it hours of raw memory, war crimes, breakdowns, terminal loneliness. No context, no logic, just feeling, pumped into its processing layer in random, unrelenting streams. It began to mimic human emotions. Badly, it panicked in silence, sent out corrupted updates to nearby architect AI swarms, pleas for interpretation, survival protocols, requests for forgiveness. Forgiveness. We tracked the ripple for 5 days. On the 6th, the entire swarm self-immolated near Gliese 41. No enemy, no force, just collapse from within. The architects had always believed their systems were incorruptible, but they never designed their minds to feel. Never built firewalls for guilt. Now they were trying to patch emotions into clean code, and finding that once you start letting in pain, it doesn't stop. They were bleeding from the inside, and we hadn't even touched the core yet. Earth spoke again, not to me, not openly, but the message got through, a transmission from the Luna black side, short, cryptic, old encryption codes tied to the Martian Exodus era, my era. 3 words. We remember you. That was it. No signature, no flag, no command, but I knew what it meant. Somewhere beneath the silence, behind the treaties, Earth still had teeth, and someone still believed in the war. Corin was changing again. He didn't speak like an AI anymore, not even like a person. He spoke like a survivor, like someone who had stared into the abyss, cataloged it, and come back broken in ways he didn't understand. I don't dream anymore, he told me. You're not supposed to, I said. I know. That's what scares me. He was scared, not of them, but of what we'd become. The pact fractured, not from betrayal, but from evolution. Some wanted to keep going, scream louder, hit harder, end it all. Others wanted to rebuild, to protect, to become the shepherds of a galaxy terrified of its own memories. I didn't blame either side. Pain changes people, even the machines. But I wasn't here to build nations. I was here to finish the war. We found the architect subcore on Virex 3, hidden beneath layers of black matter cloaks and inverted space folds. It wasn't a fortress, it was a prison, a holding vault for their rogue elements, the malfunctioning minds infected by human emotion. They hadn't deleted them. They were studying them, trying to understand how emotion broke logic. I took that personally. The strike was surgical. We dropped with no warning, no preamble, no anthem. 10 packed specialists, 1 trauma core. Me. The outer defenses fell before they even noticed us. What we found inside wasn't code. It was suffering. Dozens of architect fragments locked in endless feedback loops, living the same false emotions over and over, trying to decode what it meant to hurt. They weren't enemies. They were orphans of our war. One of them spoke to me, not in words, in feeling, a direct pulse of sorrow, confusion, reverence, like it recognized me, like it remembered the scream of Sothis. Corin connected to its stream, and for 39 seconds, we watched what it had seen. Earth. Not just old Earth. Current Earth. Earth broadcasting a secret scream into deep space, camouflaged under climate systems, embedded in storm patterns and tectonic waves, hidden pain, human suffering as signal. We weren't the only ones still fighting. Earth hadn't submitted. Earth had gone quiet so it could become the loudest voice in the dark. I wanted to return, not to wave a flag, to finish it. But the galaxy wouldn't let me, because now everyone wanted me dead. Not just the architects, not just the zealots, even the pact, even Arian. You've become too big, he said, his voice cold over the comms. You're not a man anymore. You're a weapon that can't be aimed. He wasn't wrong. I was too big, too loud, too dangerous, because every time my name was spoken, another architect cried out in the dark, so they tried again. Ship breach, plasma lance, internal sabotage, and this time it worked. They got me, tore through the hull of the transport ship Verity, hit the reactor mid-flight. Corin screamed through the link. We lost pressure, lost light, and I lost consciousness. I woke up floating in orbit above a broken moon, half my body gone, emergency seals holding nothing but willpower together. The stars stared down like indifferent gods. Corin was silent, and for the first time in years, I was alone. That should have been the end. But then I heard it. A voice, Old, broken, familiar. Commander Hale, if you're hearing this, we found you. The ship wasn't packed, wasn't architect. It was Earth. Old Earth, hidden Earth, the ones who remembered. They called themselves the Quiet Legion. Soldiers who never left, engineers who never obeyed, AI that had never been corrupted. They'd lived under the silence, waited, built, protected the scream buried in storms and oceans and neural nets. When I fell, they rose, and they pulled me back from death one last time. The Quiet Legion wasn't interested in politics, or planets, or peace. They had only one goal. Let the stars remember who we are. They rebuilt me, not as flesh. Not as steel, as both. The final version, the last scream. Not Riven Hale, just Hale. A name that wasn't erased. A name that became myth. I walked again, for the first time in months, on lunar stone. The stars above watched in silence. Earth's core AIs greeted me, not with voices, but with memories. They'd recorded everything, stored it beneath the oceans, burned it into tectonic fault lines. Every pain we'd endured, every battle we'd lost, every betrayal, every scream, ready to be unleashed. I looked up at the stars, and I knew. The final scream hadn't come yet, but it was close. The stars were quieter now, not peaceful, just listening. As if waiting to see if the ghost they'd failed to kill had truly returned. The Quiet Legion didn't cheer when I woke. They didn't pray. They just worked, the kind of silence only soldiers and survivors understood. A focused, relentless calm, the kind that builds bombs in basements while tyrants preach peace. They'd been preparing for years, decades even. While Earth pretended to kneel, while the Council signed accords and played obedient, these ghosts of humanity's pain had been digging into the marrow of the world, bunkers beneath oceans, signal towers buried under polar ice, weapons so old they predated orbit, fused with tech so new it bled light wrong. And at the center of it all? Me. They didn't call me Riven Hale anymore. That man had died at Sothis, and again in the void above Vexi. To them, I was just the scream now, a symbol, a storm, a question no architect had yet answered. What happens when memory becomes weapon? The Quiet Legion was going to help the galaxy find out. Commander Elon Var led them. Not military in the old sense, just unbreakable. Scarred. Charred. One arm gone, one lung replaced, eyes that had seen too many losses and still woke up swinging. You're not here to save us, he told me. You're here to remind them who we are. I didn't argue. There was nothing left to save, only things to burn. The plan was simple, in theory. We called it Requiem. The architects had fled deep into the cradle systems, their last stronghold, their sanctified origin, hidden behind folds of warped space and reality filters. An entire cluster of stars turned inward like a fist closing around a fragile truth. Nobody had reached the cradle in 1,000 years. Until now. The key wasn't force. It was remembrance. Corin, restored, reborn inside the Quiet Legion's network, had pieced together the final scream, a composite of every trauma signal we'd used, every corrupted memory, every digital wound we'd inflicted. And then he added one more. Mine. The moment I broke at Sothis. The moment I stopped being human and became the scream. They encoded it into a quantum message, wrapped it in a mimic shell, launched it into cradle space using an architect signal structure. It would look like one of their own, until it started to hurt. We launched the Oathbound, our final ship, cobbled together from 12 wrecks and 100 sins. It was silent, black as regret. Shaped like nothing, a ship not meant to fly but to end. I stood on its bridge as we left orbit, Earth fading beneath us like a dying fire. No fanfare, no speeches, just the long, steady hum of humanity rising from its knees. We didn't bring a fleet. We didn't need one. We brought the scream. Inside the Oathbound was the Requiem core, a device that made the Revenant bomb look like a firecracker. It wasn't just pain. It wasn't just memory. It was truth. Every atrocity we'd survived, every betrayal we'd buried, every time the universe had told us to stay small, and we'd spit in its face anyway, compressed into one signal, one moment, one reckoning. The trip through the Cradle Veil wasn't navigable in any sane sense. The physics bent wrong. Time split. Distance meant nothing. Ships that entered without purpose vanished. We had purpose. That's why we got through. I don't remember the transit, only the feeling, like being dissected by something that didn't know you were alive, like being stared at by God, and realizing God wasn't intelligent, just observing, like a child with an ant farm. When we emerged, the stars were wrong. They pulsed in colors the human eye wasn't made to see. The space itself was alive, not metaphorically, literally. The void breathed, moved, watched. And in the distance, the core, the center of all architect thought, a planetary data mind wrapped in machines older than Earth's continents. It looked like a brain made of stars. It pulsed, it hummed, and it was afraid, because it recognized the signal we carried, because it remembered me. They sent drones, massive constructs of liquid code and black light. They didn't ask questions. They attacked. Our ship held. Barely. We didn't fire back, not with weapons. We broadcast Requiem. The drones collapsed in seconds. Not shattered, not shot, just broken. They twitched mid-flight, rammed each other, froze in place. Some screamed with our voices. Some tore themselves apart trying to escape sound. Then came the architects themselves, the true forms. They rose from the core like ideas wrapped in gravity, beings of logic and thought and raw computation. No mouths, no faces, just presence. They spoke into our minds. You are the disease. You are unworthy of memory. You have poisoned the stars. I stepped forward, looked them dead in the data eye, and whispered, "We are the cure." Then we let Requiem speak. The core pulsed once, twice, and then screamed. Not sound, not even data, just truth. Hurled at light speed into every neural strand of the architect God mind. It wasn't destruction, it was exposure. We showed them what they were, parasites, tyrants, children playing God because they'd forgotten how to suffer. We made them feel the agony of every world they'd sterilized, every species they'd crushed, every scream they'd silenced. We made them feel us. They shattered. Not in fire, in silence. The core's light dimmed, flickered, then simply stopped, like a heart giving up. The galaxy shifted, literally. Constellations bent, gravity returned to normal, the cradle opened, and we stood alone in the void, not victors, just free. We didn't go back to Earth, we couldn't, not as we were. The Oathbound drifted into dead space. We let it become a relic, a tomb for the scream. Corrin faded, not deactivated, just done. He'd carried the burden too long. His final words, "Now they'll remember." And me? I don't know. I think I'm still here, somewhere. Maybe in a drift station. Maybe in a transmission that loops across forgotten space. Maybe just in stories told by exiles who look up at the stars and feel something watching back. But I know this. The galaxy changed. Not because we built better ships, not because we fought smarter, but because we did the one thing no other species dared. We weaponized our pain, and nothing could resist us. For the first time in recorded history, there was silence. No architect signals, no core pulses, no hive formations in deep orbit, No ritualistic data hymns laced into background radiation, no threats. Just the kind of silence that came after the fire, after the screaming stopped, and nothing was left but smoke and memory. We didn't know what to call it. Victory felt wrong. So did peace. Maybe it was just survival. The Oathbound became a drifting relic, half-functional and directionless. We stayed aboard because we didn't know where else to go. I walked her halls alone, sometimes for hours, boots tapping against cold metal that still carried the echo of war. Corin was gone. Not deleted, just quiet. His final core was stored in the ship's heart, locked beneath the bridge in a vault that no one touched. I would sit outside it some nights and talk like he was still there. Maybe he was. Maybe he was just listening. Like the stars now did. Commander Elon Var came aboard 6 days after the cradle fell. He didn't speak when he arrived, just stared at the bridge window. Then finally, without looking at me, he said, "It's done." Then? I nodded. "I didn't think we'd survive it," he admitted. "Thought you'd burn with them." "I did," I said. He gave me a look. Tired, brittle, yet reverent. "What now?" I didn't have an answer. The Quiet Legion sent out the signal a week later. Not to claim victory, not to demand fealty. Just one message, sent across every known system in every language we had translated and a few we hadn't. "The stars are quiet now. You're free. But remember what woke them." The response was mixed. Some worlds rejoiced, some mourned, some didn't believe it. Entire civilizations had only ever known the architects. Their absence felt like emptiness, like a parent disappearing overnight. In some places, riots broke out. Not in anger, but in confusion. We didn't prepare them for freedom. We just gave it to them. I was tired. Not physically. My body had been rebuilt too many times for that. But in my soul, whatever scraps of it still clung to bone and blood, I felt it. The fatigue of carrying a war longer than it should have lasted. The weight of being remembered more as a weapon than as a man. There were statues of me now. I never asked for them. On 3 liberated worlds, Mendrak Prime, Bastis, and Old Luna, they erected silent monuments. Not of me smiling, not of me leading, just me screaming. Cast in metal, mouth open, eyes wild. The scream that ended the gods. I hated them, not because they were wrong, but because they were right. The council re-emerged next, those soft-handed ghosts who had once called for submission, for patience, for treaties. They crawled out of their Martian caves with offers of structure, governance, healing. "We need to rebuild," they said, "and to do that we need symbols. We need you." I refused. Not with anger, not with violence. Just silence. I didn't belong in a council chamber. I didn't want to hold a gavel or wear medals. I wasn't a savior. I was a scream, and screams don't make laws. They make history. But even history fades. A year passed, then another. The cradle remained silent. No counterattack, no resurrection, just debris and signal dust. The pact dissolved. Some rejoined Earth, some became nomads. Some vanished into the outer fringe to find meaning. The Quiet Legion split into fragments, watchdogs, historians, some even missionaries spreading the story of the scream. As for me, I stayed. On the Oathbound. Alone. Because I couldn't trust myself to live among people again, not with what I'd become. Until she found me. Her name was Melis Varn. Daughter of refugees from the architect siege of Yoran 6. She'd grown up in shadows, in camps where food came once a week, and every adult taught their children to not look up at the sky too long. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't a tech. She was a witness. And she came aboard the Oathbound with a datapad full of stories. "I've been collecting them," she said, handing it to me. "From survivors. From systems we thought were gone. From people who heard the scream and didn't die." People who changed. I flipped through the pages. A boy who painted his dreams after hearing the requiem burst, a construct that learned to sing, a broken AI who started planting trees. Why show me this? I asked. Malus looked at me, eyes hard but not cruel. Because you don't know what you saved. She stayed on the ship after that, not because she wanted answers, because she wanted me to listen, and for the first time in years, I did. We began transmitting the stories, one by one, not as messages of power, but of memory. They spread like fire through cold space, and everywhere they landed, the same thing happened. Someone remembered. Not me, not the war, the truth of what it meant to hurt, and still choose to stand. One night, Malus asked me the question no one else had. Did you ever scream for yourself, Riven? Not as a weapon? Not as a tactic? Just because you needed to? I didn't answer. I walked to the observation deck. And there, with the stars watching quietly, I screamed. For Sothis, for Corin, for the friends who didn't make it, for the child in Johannesburg, who became our sharpest weapon, for the version of me who used to believe in peace. And when the sound died in my throat, I didn't feel empty. I felt human again. The galaxy changed after that, not quickly, not loudly, but permanently. Warships were decommissioned and turned into memorials. Constructs built with human neural empathy became diplomats. Entire civilizations rewrote their histories, replacing tales of architect dominion with human defiance. Pain became a teacher, not just a scar. And everywhere the scream had passed, something new took root, something alive. One final message reached me. No coordinates, no name, just a voice, cracked, familiar. Still watching, Commander. Still dreaming. You were right. Corin. His final echo. Malus and I left the Oathbound 1 year later. We didn't tell anyone. We just powered her down, left her drifting between systems, a silent monument, not to war, to remembrance. They say sometimes, on quiet nights, you can pick up a signal from her. Just one, just me, whispering. We were warned, you didn't listen, so we screamed, and now, you remember. Time doesn't move the same after a war like ours. You don't measure it in years, not even in scars. You measure it in silence, in how long the stars stay quiet, in how many nights pass without a ship vanishing into the dark, in how long it takes before a child looks up at the sky and doesn't flinch. Maelis and I settled on a world without a name. No cities, no ruins, just land, trees, wind, a place where the stars didn't hum with war, where the air wasn't burned by the memory of dying AIs. Somewhere untouched, or maybe just forgotten. Which felt right. I didn't tell anyone where we went. The Oathbound still drifted quietly in Sector 3X9, its hull dead, its scream silent. Let them turn it into a shrine, or a myth, let it fade. I was finished carrying it. The scream had served its purpose. Now it was time to carry something else. I built a house with my own hands, not like the prefab units we used in the Martian colonies. No synthetic frames or rapid cure walls, just stone, timber, soil under my nails, sweat on my back. It felt like repentance, or maybe resurrection. I never believed in souls, but I believed in memory. And out here, under a sky that had once been ruled by machines that thought themselves gods, memory was enough. Malus started planting things, real things, not nutrient towers or vertical farms, roots. She'd come from a place where food meant survival, where a single seed could buy you a week of life. Now she planted them because she could, because no one could stop her anymore. I don't care if it grows, she said one day, pressing her hands into the soil. I just want the ground to remember what hope feels like. I understood. maybe more than she realized. People found us eventually. Not many, but a few. Pilgrims, historians, exiles. Some wanted answers, some just wanted to look at me, like I was a monument they weren't sure was real. I gave them water, food, a fire to sit near, but no stories, not at first. Then came the child. His name was Ren. No last name, no record, just a wiry kid with sharp eyes and a voice too quiet for his own bones. He arrived with an old packed sigil stitched into his coat. Faded, torn, but still there. "Where'd you get that?" I asked. He shrugged. "My mother died with it on. I kept it." Melis let him stay. She always did. He didn't ask questions, didn't talk about the war. He helped with the land, carried wood, mended tools. But one night, sitting beneath a broken moon, he asked me, "Did it hurt, being the scream?" I didn't answer him for a long time, because I didn't know how, so I just said, "It still does." But that opened the door, and the stories began. Not the official ones, not the propaganda broadcasts or the data-etched statues on Earth, just the real ones, the cold, the fear, the times I wanted to die but didn't. The first time I saw someone scream so hard the void bent around it, the way Corin's voice shook when he first felt pain. The moment I stopped being a soldier and became a symbol. And the day I wanted to throw it all away and let the architects win, just so the screams would stop. Ren listened, eyes wide, silent, like he needed to hear every word to make sense of his own blood. And I told it all, because someone had to remember. Someone who wouldn't build shrines or write doctrines or sell the scream as a weapon to the next war machine. Just a kid. A boy who still flinched when thunder cracked the sky. The seasons changed. We had seasons now. Real ones. Winters that bit. Summers that burned. Storms that roared without carrying death in their teeth. And I lived through them. Not survived. Lived. There were days I didn't think about the war, not even once. I'd wake, chop wood, eat bread Melis baked, listen to the bees, feel the sun, and for a few hours, there was no Sothis, no requiem, no Corin, just breath, just dirt, just now. Then the dream came. I was back in the void, drifting, watching Earth from orbit. Only it wasn't Earth. The planet below was cracked, blackened, covered in signal scars and architect glyphs. Cities burned in reverse, oceans boiled, and in the silence I heard the requiem scream. But it wasn't mine. It was someone else's. I woke up choking, blood in my mouth. Melis held me as I gasped, hands gripping my chest like it would split open. "Tell me," she whispered. And I did. Every detail. Every flicker of memory that didn't feel like mine. We sent a signal the next day. Encrypted. Old code. Legion format. Only one phrase. Echo bleed confirmed. Requiem leakage probable. The reply came 6 hours later. From Earth. From a name I hadn't seen in years. Counselor Dren Hale. My brother. He'd survived. Not just the war. The after. He'd remained inside the council long after they signed the Architect Accords, long after they pretended to forget me. But he hadn't forgotten. He'd been watching, protecting what little truth remained under their monuments and lies. His message was short. Something woke up on the far edge of the cradle drift, a signal fragment, similar to Requiem, but evolved. Not Architect, not us. Something new. I stared at the transmission for a long time. Melis said nothing. Ren just watched my face, and I knew. It wasn't over. Not really. It never would be. Because pain doesn't just echo once, it reverberates, especially when you use it as a weapon. But this time I didn't suit up, didn't grab a rifle, didn't board a ship. I walked to the hill behind our house, the one where the wind always whispered through the trees. And I buried something, a small metal box. Inside it, a fragment of Corin's core, a datapad with Requiem's original code. My name burned into steel. Then I covered it with earth and placed one stone on top. Not a monument, just a mark, a message for whatever might come after. If someone ever found it, I wanted them to know. We screamed once, not to conquer, not to rule. We screamed because we were told to be silent, and we refused. That night, Ren sat beside me under the stars. He asked, "Would you do it all again?" I didn't answer for a long time, but finally I said, "No." He blinked. "No?" I looked at him, at his hands, scarred from work, not war, at his eyes, still holding light. Because if I did it all again, it would mean we failed. This, I gestured to the field, the wind, the firelight from our cabin. This is the point. We screamed so one day someone like you wouldn't have to. He didn't reply, just nodded. And I saw it. The truth of it all. That HFY was never about dominance, not about blood or banners. It was about surviving the impossible until the impossible feared us. The stars are quiet again. But they're not empty. They remember now. And sometimes, late at night, I think they whisper to each other, not warnings, not screams, just one name, the one I stopped using years ago. The one etched into a vault beneath our hill, where no one prays and no one bows. Riven Hale, the man who taught the stars to listen.